There's Just Something About Kansas City is brought to you in part by the generosity of our friends at the Cockrell Family Foundation. Thank you. Well, welcome to another episode of There's Just Something About Kansas City, and you can tell we are out of the studio once again. We couldn't be happier than to be here. We're at the Linda Hall Library with the president and CEO, brand new,
yes.
Just under a year. You've been here,
That's
Dr.
right.
Eric Dorfman. Doctor, thanks so much for having us into your place.
Well, thank you. Welcome. It's great to have you here and great to chat.
Yeah. Give me you are a well-traveled guy. You're Californian, Southern
That's right.
California.
Yeah.
You went to school at San Diego and San Jose.
That's right.
And then you get your master's in Sydney, Australia.
Master's is PhD in Australia, in Sydney.
Yeah, right.
That's
and then
right.
you'd gotten your master's in New Zealand, correct?
No, master's in...
Gosh, I got this all wrong.
No, that's all right. It was the San Jose. It was Moss Landing Marine Laboratories in sort of Monterey, near Monterey. That was my master's, marine biology, and then went to Sydney for my PhD.
Yeah.
And I was all done with schooling by the time I hit New Zealand. So.
But by the time you hit New Zealand.
That's right.
But you were also not just an American citizen, you were also an Australian
and New Zealand.
New Zealander,
yes,
right?
There are three. I'm just kind of collecting passports now. I'm looking for Swiss if anybody's got one.
Yeah, right. Plus, you've been to South Africa and Germany as well.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah. Postdoc in South Africa.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I'm interested to get your first impressions after being here for a short period of time of Kansas City, middle of the country, place maybe you haven't spent a whole lot of time in before
really.
this.
Yeah, no, I hadn't been to Kansas City before coming here for my initial visits for the Linda Hall. But honestly, one of the things, I'm just loving it. And one of the things that I really enjoy so much about it is that there's this, for a city of its size, there's this density of cultural infrastructure that you don't find in many places. And so it feels like the cultural opportunities of a much bigger city without the traffic, without a lot of the problems that are also associated with a really big city. So yeah, I'm loving it. It's been so welcoming. Everybody's been just really sort of embracing of my being here, and it's been very easy to settle in.
Right,
yeah.
And you came from North Carolina to
that's right.
North Carolina
That's right.
State, and your background is extremely interesting to me because I know the Linda Hall Library would like to be more well known.
Right.
I will tell. I'll be one of the first people to tell you. I didn't know it existed until we started, and I've been here since 1981.
Wow.
Until we started doing this, and somebody said, "Oh, let's do the Linda Hall Library." And I'm thinking,
what is that?
Is that the Kansas City Library? And no, it's the Linda Hall Library. It's it's a very niche-oriented library, and they want to get their word out a little bit because,
You know, it's funny too how like if you break your arm and it's a cast and everybody says, "How'd you break your arm?" And you're just like, in the end, you're like, okay, I have to answer this again. One of the things that people say when I first got here, so a year ago almost, it's a hidden gem, right? And that phrase, hidden gem, is like, okay, come on, what can we do about that now?
Yeah, right.
And now people are dropping the word hidden, which is great. I'm so excited about that. And of course, we've got a great team promoting the incredible assets we have here. And we've also started a much more robust exhibition program.
Right.
We've got a brand new vice president of exhibitions, which is wonderful. So we're finding not only the ability to tell our story more, but new ways to do it and much bigger ways to do it. Which
right,
is
and you're sort of in hospitality and tourism and museums and trying to tie them together, which I found very interesting.
Yeah,
because you're trying. Well, when people arrive here, and we're going to have the World Cup here in 2026,
yes,
there are people from all over the world. And all of a sudden, there are more places to go besides Union Station, World War I Museum, which are wonderful places as well. 18th and Vine District, a lot of historical places. But hey, we're over here. We have a really cool place to see as well.
Right. Well, and that's the other thing too, that we're, you mentioned a lot of those things that are more downtown, but we're also really in kind of a cultural district here too. We've got the Nelson Atkins, of course. There's the Toy and Miniature Museum just across the street. And so we're sort of forming, of course, the Kemper Art Museum too, all these right in this sort of little cluster. And so we're in a great space to be kind of celebrating that more, I guess you could say, museum flavor that many libraries, independent research libraries around the country are doing. So think of like the Huntington in Los Angeles, also the Getty in Los Angeles, the Morgan Library in New York. These are independent research libraries just like us, but they have a really robust program that people come to see. And so that, and of course we've got the Arboretum too. And so thinking about, right now we're thinking about how we can have the Arboretum help us tell our story.
Right.
So.
And because of the niche that you have here with the STEM, okay, we're talking about science, technology, engineering, and math. The original concept, back with the original board of directors, Linda Hall and the family gave the money.
That's right.
And they said, you set up a library and a museum, whatever way you want to do this, but they left it in the hands of the board of directors and the trustees. And they came up with the idea, we have libraries here in Kansas City, but we don't have, we're missing something. There's a hole here. And they filled that with this library, with this idea about using it for, STEM.
Well, and in fact, we had a broader, at one point when we started, we had a broader remit. And at one point early on, the trustees decided that we would be science, technology, and engineering, but not medical library. So we kind of traded parts of our collection with the Clendening, which is the KU Medical Library. So they have a really rich medical holding, and we have the parts of their collection that didn't fit with their collecting. And it was interesting, on our recent trip around the country, we met with the Newberry Library in Chicago, and their founders had done the exact same thing, get together with the other libraries around Chicago, decide we'll have this particular niche, and everyone else has theirs.
Right.
So it seems like it was maybe a common thing back in the early days.
Yeah, right. That's because you all interact. When they need something, they call you. When you need something, you call them, when it's right up their alley of what exactly they're trying to get done.
Exactly. And we've got warm relationships with other Kansas City libraries, of course, as well as cultural institutions.
It's funny that a lot of people in Kansas City really don't know about the Linda Hall Library, you know what I mean? And I think maybe there's some people on the outside that know more about it than the people on the inside, because they come to you when they need certain research done. When I've got to find this rare book, I've got to find this rare passage, and all these other things that are pertinent to their, education type situation.
That's right.
So.
And we do have a lot of material that nobody else has, and so that's one of our claims to fame really is that if you're interested in a certain branch of science and you can't find it anywhere else, we're the ones to have it. So that's great.
Yeah. So when you first were in contact with Linda Hall Library, I shouldn't assume anything. Did they come after you?
Yes, they did.
Okay, I was going to say they probably came after you, and all of a sudden you're in North Carolina State. You're doing your thing. You're on the board of tourism with both Pittsburgh, which we'll talk about, which is my old hometown.
Oh,
First place I ever saw a dinosaur.
Oh, wow.
Was in the Carnegie Museum.
Right.
Which you were part of, but you were in the tourism with the North Carolina and with Pittsburgh, with Raleigh and Pittsburgh, and it's just all of a sudden Kansas City comes to you. What was your initial thought when you heard Kansas City was interested?
Well, certainly I was excited and flattered. I did wonder whether or not my skill set would translate to a library. As you're saying, I'm involved with tourism. I'm involved with museums, natural history museums. My PhD is in wildlife ecology.
Right.
So I have this very deep history with collecting natural history objects and with getting that story out to the public in a very museum type way. And to give you an example of one of the differences, the visitation in North Carolina, 1.6 million visitors a year.
Wow.
Here, when I started, 5,000 visitors a year.
Oh, wow.
So it's a very different, but of course many of those visitors are much more deeply invested, so it's just a different kind of conversation with your constituents. And so I thought about it a lot, came out and visited. We had a great, I did a lot of talking with the recruitment team, the board. And what I realized is that what excites me about cultural institutions is also found here. And I'm an author as well. So
yes, I've written
5 books. And so, I thought a lot about what I would get on a personal level by being surrounded by books that many of which are on topics that are very dear to me. So I used to have that office right up there. And every time I would walk the stairs just behind this bookcase, and I would see the bats of New Zealand on one of the books, like just random book, walking up. And I was at one point on the bat recovery group for the New Zealand Department of Conservation. So it just gave me this warm little kind of feeling of home. And I thought, yeah, I'm in the right place.
It was a sign.
This is great. It was a sign. Yes, that's right. In black and gold right there. So
you don't think they planted that at all, do you?
I wouldn't know. I don't want to know, I don't think. But, for me, though, I really feel like there's so much, and certainly when I walk through the stacks, I'll go, that's a book I need to read, and I'll take it and check it out, and there's just so much here. And the thing that's actually wonderful too is that anybody in Kansas City can have a library card, and there are, in these open stacks, so the ones you can see around you here, people can come and check out books. And if you're interested in nature or science or astronomy or there's just so many things here, you can come and find a richer collection than in many other libraries that the public can access. So that is also really exciting way of connecting.
Right. So how do you were involved with museums, and museums, I'm going to say, are probably easier just from the standpoint of there's T-Rex, there's
That's right.
Some arthropod over here. There's our you can go into our planetarium.
That's
you
right.
can look at the stars. It has to be a little bit easier than this. So how will you try to get that out to the public, exactly what they can see here? And I know you have exhibits here all the time. They rotate about every 6 to 9 months.
That's right.
And there are different things. I've seen everything from earthworms to exo-planets.
Yes,
okay, so
right.
you're under the earth all the way to, is there life out there, type deal. So it's interesting. It's very interesting.
Well, and so here's the thing that's similar between a natural history museum and Linda Hall Library is that the knowledge that you can extract from the collection. And so in a natural history museum, of course, you just have the specimens and you have to figure out what that knowledge is, but you're still going in and figuring out what other researchers have said about the things that are in your collections. Here, our collections are books, so the ideas are already sort of embedded in them, right?
Yes.
But we can take out a Darwin origin of species. In fact, you can see there's one on display at the moment, right? And that is the first time ever that survival of the fittest was used in print.
That phrase.
And we have many examples in our and so we have many examples in our collection of the first time something was said that now we think is just part of our language.
Right.
And so bringing that out and telling people not only how these concepts evolved to be part of our language, but also thinking about the future, where we're headed as a society, where we're headed, where our science is headed, what are our concerns of tomorrow, like microplastics and the health impacts of that. There's so many things that we can do that are very much like a museum, really of any type, whether it's an art museum or a natural history museum. Finding the key stories within your collections are, and then finding an exciting, engaging way to tell the people who visit about it. That's very similar. And I'll tell you right now, we have very fall, we have opening our UFOs exhibition, which is going to be very, very exciting. Yeah, that's great. Can't wait to show you around. And so I'm Eric Ward, our vice president of programming, is doing part of the curation, and I'm doing another part of it. And the piece that I'm doing is around astrobiology, so the biology of hypothesized aliens, what that looks like and how that might be connected to planets of different kinds. And that's what I'm doing, exploring not only our collection, but what I know about biology and ecology. So it's kind of a partnership between myself and all of these other authors that have been going since, in fact, the earliest book that we're using is from 1866. So there's some really fun and some great pop culture stuff there too.
Yeah.
So there's lots to be able to talk about. And you think 1.5, 1.3 million books, there's a lot of stories there.
Oh, tons, yeah. And the other thing is it becomes more relatable at that point
absolutely.
too. And it becomes less intimidating for somebody to go, well, I was going to go to Linda Hall Library. And they're going, you're going where? Linda Hall Library. Well, I mean, it's really, that stuff's really highbrow stuff. But
or can you even get in?
Yeah, am I allowed in the front door of the Linda Hall Library? And it just becomes more relatable to the general public.
Absolutely.
There are some fascinating things here that you don't have to be intimidated by.
That's right. Yeah. That's right.
So that's, I think that's a big thing.
And the other point, just maybe to round out the answer to your question, we also have a lot of great partnerships around the country. So if you saw all those birds that are in our Chain to the Sky, that's all on loan to us from the Field Museum in Chicago. So we're always looking for partners to work with. We talked to the Nelson Atkins. They've been very generous with us and other more far-flung institutions. And so always looking at the broader relevance of what's in our collection.
Yeah, that's just incredible, and I think it's fascinating because I am a believer that we're not alone. Okay, that's just me. Okay, I am.
Well,
I just
certainly
don't
the
think
Drake equation
we can't possibly be alone. And you talk about the Drake equation, which is another subject altogether. When Eric Dorfman was growing up, in Southern California. When did this all start to happen for you, where you're going, I want to do that? Or was it a metamorphosis for you?
Well, it's such an interesting thing. So one of my earliest memories, we were born in Malibu. I was born in Malibu.
Nice, very nice.
Yes, very nice. We had a house on the beach.
You a surfer?
I used to be.
Okay,
yeah, all right. There's not much place to surf in Kansas City, but that's okay. That's all right. Lived on the beach, and do you know what grunion are? So grunion are these fish, right? They're a particular kind of fish, and this is one of my very earliest memories. I was a toddler at this point, and they're kind of fish like a sprat. They're about that long, and they come and they spawn on a full moon in summer. They spawn in the surf, just the frothy surf right on the sand there at a high tide, a king tide, and then they'll go back in the water, and then a month later their babies will hatch out. Well, people love to go and collect these fish while they're spawning and fry them up. So I know it's quite a thing, but one of my earliest memories is down there with my parents and their friends with these fish squirming around my feet and flashlights and buckets and everything. And it was just such an amazing memory. And I realized that and also watching chicks hatch at the Los Angeles Science Center, County Science Center, in an egg hatching machine.
And you're still very young at this point?
Very young. I was probably around 3 the first time we went on a grunion hunt, and maybe 4, 5, 6 years old watching a chick hatch. But those, not only did they connect me to wildlife, but I realized many years later connected me to the cultural institutions that interpret that for you. And so I've always had this and my parents, were very indulgent in anything I wanted to learn or think about, and take me to the zoo. And
right.
The zoo was always my favorite place to go, or the Natural History Museum in Los Angeles. And then later on we moved up to the Bay Area, and so we had California Academy of Sciences. And when I was 19, I think, I was working at California Academy of Sciences, diving into the big shark tank, shoving salmon heads into the shark mouth as they swam by.
You gotta be
so,
kidding me.
No, it was great. It was really fantastic. So I've had this kind of love of wildlife and nature forever. And that's, of course, the podcast Love Nature, talking to other people about why they love nature is something that's so compelling. But I've also, I've had an arts stream of work. I sang opera as an undergraduate, and really thought for a long time that I would go into classical singing as a career. And then I got infected by David Attenborough and the conservation messages, and was so just taken by what I felt was a real need in me to be doing something for conservation. Right. And that's why I've pursued wildlife ecology as a PhD, and moved on to kind of more the storytelling, right? Everything that I've been doing, from the books to leading institutions, has been about hopefully sharing my passion about nature and conservation with the rest of the world.
Yeah, right. And you glossed over your podcast, Love Nature.
Oh yeah, that's right.
It is an extremely important podcast that's on. It is one of the top 10%. It's in the entire world. It's one of the top 10% podcasts in the entire world, which is not 10% in the United States. Okay,
right.
10% in the entire world.
Right,
which is just phenomenal.
And to me that speaks so much to the topic, how resonant the idea of, what people love about nature and their joy in talking about it. And so, E.O. Wilson, the late professor of entomology, who was such a prolific author, he was the inaugural interviewee, and he was just great. He was really, we gave him two episodes. He was just great. And of course now that I'm here in Kansas City, we'll be launching this year a podcast based out of the Linda Hall.
Right, I was gonna morph right into that. You led me right down that lane, and I think that'll be incredible, because the more you can get the information out there about what Linda Hall Library is all about, the more people you're going to get through the front door.
The thing is, too, I think, and I think what we'll be doing is really talking to people again about what they love about nature. In fact, it'll be called Drawn from Nature, and which is a quote, if you've seen the Audubon, the big Audubon book there, and if tiny little letters, you'll see that on every painting he wrote Drawn from Nature, which is just, to me, an important connection. You think about, it takes a human to draw, but it's that relationship between nature that allows you to do it.
Right. And you had this love of nature and everything about it from a young age.
Very young.
When did you start to feel this country started to turn around a little bit with everybody's getting a little bit more concerned about what's going on with biodiversity, with pollution, with global warming, with everything else everybody is talking about, and the debates going on back and forth about everything that's happened. When did you feel the change?
Things
start to
early
change?
2000s, I think, really. I remember in the 1990s looking in newspapers back when we had them.
Yeah, right.
and looking for stories about nature and conservation, and just going, there's just nothing here. And now you get, it's this constant stream of concern, but also joy around it. And I'm not sure what changed. It might be folks like David Attenborough who became a popularizer of natural history. But it could also, I think part of what played into it was the realization of how bad plastic pollution, especially ocean pollution, really was. Seeing some natural disasters, the socialization of, if you like, of climate change, and what that, whether people believed it or not, that at least it was a phrase that everybody had some inkling what it was. It wasn't this sort of mysterious thing out there. And I think that there was a pretty good few years where people trusted science and realized that the news wasn't all good. It's not all Bambi and whatever. It's actually, there's some really darker stories. And it wasn't probably until another maybe 15 years later, so say maybe the mid-teens, where science itself started to come into question, and that I find deeply disturbing.
Yeah.
And one of the things that's been kind of my passions, and I really want Linda Hall to help with, is instilling or maintaining a trust in the scientific process. We have about 25 to 30 research scholars who come here every year. We have me and other staff members with PhDs. We have deep research on many, many topics here. Well, we're very well placed to say to people, to answer the question, what is science? And science is a process, really. And what does that mean, and what does it mean to me? And all those things, I feel, really wrap up into a very important story. And that is where I think we're going to have the most purchase with engaging with the public.
Right. Trying to get them back on the science side of it to let know,
exactly.
we're doing this mathematically, and we've had millions of years to study, and things that we don't totally comprehend or understand.
That's right.
At the moment, but we're trying, and it is an evolving process.
Yes.
There's no doubt about that. Do you feel people in other parts of the world? You've lived in New Zealand, South Africa, Germany, Australia. Do you think people in other parts of the world are more attuned to it than we are here in the United States?
It's a hard thing because, of course, the United States is so big and so diverse. I think that there are elements of the U.S. that are still very, accepting and curious of what the science world has to tell us.
Right.
Maybe nationally, I feel like, I feel like other places have maybe conquered that challenge a little better. Mm-hmm. And it certainly gives us, one of the things, maybe this is just a plug for teachers, I think that we as a society, as an American society, need to invest more in our school teachers, because they're the ones who set the stage for people's trajectory through
just
life.
like it was set with you when you were young.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
same,
And
same
I
thing.
mean, I didn't say, but I had the benefit of some very, very good early teachers. My math teacher actually, we would go on these school excursions, so overnights, and I would get up really early in the morning, like the mist was still out, and he'd get up early, and we'd trek around, and he would show me. He was the one who I'd never heard of Audubon before, and I didn't know one bird from the next, and he was telling me all about the biology of the birds and how to identify them and their calls. It was magic. It was really very special moment for me,
Right.
and very that's the kind of impact that teachers can have, and I think if we invested more in them, I think my answer might be a little bit different.
Yeah, right.
To you.
Because and the kids, the education these days too, you get, I don't know, when I was growing up, and that's ancient history, of course, but it's so much more disciplined. Everything
Right.
was so much more disciplined
That's right.
than it is now. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? I think that has a lot to do with it too, because you could just wander away. Your mind just wanders away back to the screens you're playing on, or whatever you're doing.
Yeah.
Everything wanders away from education, where they could find some fascinating things if they would just be able to reach out and touch it, or reach out and somebody helps them reach out to understand what's going on.
Well, and this is actually something this is going to be more of a museum-based comment, but one of the questions always with things, with museums generally, is, well, if we can see your objects online, why would we ever go into your building?
Visit.
But of course, there is nothing more important than seeing the object in person. And if you can say, well, okay, Sir Isaac Newton held this book, all these dog ears in this book he made.
Right.
Or Galileo took out a pen and he scribbled in the side of this.
In Latin.
Right? In Latin.
In Latin.
Right.
I saw that book.
Yes. So those are the kinds of things that a digital image just will not replace.
Right.
And why, although they're very important, and for people who can't get into the library themselves or the museum, whatever, it's great to have those resources. But there is, and so when you were talking about kids in school and like they're playing on their screens, we can't get the content mixed up with the medium. Always the digital medium, the iPad, the whatever, should be a tool to getting to whatever that rich content is, not an end in itself. And I think that oftentimes we confuse that.
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt about that. And I think more kids would be interested if it was open to them, and they realized it was open to them.
For sure.
That they could get to it. Because I can remember even my own education. We'll go back to Pittsburgh, and I think I told Eric Ward this. The first time you heard about dinosaurs, okay?
Yeah.
But you'd never seen one. You have no idea.
Yeah.
You see it in a book, and they try to illustrate it or whatever.
Yeah.
And I went into the Carnegie Museum in Pittsburgh, right around the corner from my high school, Central Catholic, right there on Fifth Avenue, right around the corner. Went in there, and all of a sudden there's a T-Rex.
Yeah.
That all the bones are there. In the Carnegie Museum at one time, I don't know if it's still true, they have more dinosaur skeleton type things than any other museum in the world. I think
that's likely true.
Yeah.
There's certainly, because of when Carnegie was and the fact that he was out there collecting stuff, taking advantage of those things. Right. Yeah, certainly at one time that was true. I'm not sure if it's
it might not be anymore.
Now that there's so many more things being discovered.
And the first time you walk in, your jaw drops.
But the type specimen of T-Rex is probably the one you saw.
Yes.
Yes, it is and so type specimen, for people who don't know, is the one that all other T-Rexes are compared to see if it really is a T-Rex or if it's something different. So it's kind of usually the first one ever discovered.
Wow.
Yeah, so, and in fact, I saw my favorite moment at the Carnegie Museum of Natural History. Just happened to be walking by that very same T-Rex, and there was he was 4 years old, this kid, and he walked into that hall and just went, whoa. And I just thought that's the moment that we all want to have in a museum. Right. It was just great.
It's still ingrained with me. So I'm sure for that 4-year-old, it's going to be ingrained with him for the rest of his life
that's
too.
right.
You know, it's just a phenomenal place. It was just incredible. And that's when you start thinking about other things. Then you think about, well, where are they now?
That's right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And what happened to them at that point? Oh, something fell from outer space and wiped them all out. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Can that happen again? Oh, let's start studying outer space. And that all just makes this giant loop that people, as far as their education is concerned, even if they don't go into what you went into, even if they don't become scientists.
Oh, that's right.
They just, whatever they do,
that's right.
That's always a point for their education or thinking about.
You know, too, the other thing is, there's one other way. You know, we can create experiences for people here, and I like to think that we will get to the point where we are creating transformational experiences for people who come in, and whether that's something they read or something they see in front of them, but also we can encourage them to go out and be more open to those other transformational experiences out in the rest of the world.
Right.
And so, you know, we want to use every tool at our disposal to make that happen, including, as I said before, the Arboretum. You know, that really can be for us an outdoor classroom.
Yeah.
Pretty exciting.
Absolutely, because I know the Carnegie Museum in Pittsburgh, not to go back to it, but the library is connected right next door to the museum.
That's right, they share
which
a
makes
wall,
it, they share a wall. You can walk through the doors and go right in the library there, which is just a little bit different here. You just don't have that museum type feel, you know, as far as like that is concerned. That's the ideal situation.
Right. But it's, you know, it is interesting too. So I mentioned that we've been traveling, going and seeing these places, and some of these libraries that do such a good job at contextualizing their material, their books, the objects that might be related to their books in a more, what you would consider a more traditional museum setting rather than a library setting.
Right.
And they've given us a lot to think about in terms of the lessons that we can take on board and our options here, really, in this building, like even where we're sitting right now.
Right. And you also give people the opportunity, they can check out videos of how to become a scientist. How do you?
Oh, right. That's
how
all
do you
online.
become a scientist?
That's right.
An astronomer, veterinarian, of all things,
right.
And even an animator.
That's right.
Which I don't think people would understand it. Oh, they have that there too.
Yeah.
And I can get my kid online to check out those videos and see if this is what they really want to pursue in life, what it basically takes to pursue that in life.
Yeah. That's great, and that's also Eric Ward's initiative,
right?
And our YouTube channel. That's a very popular part of our offering, is that relatability, right? The science that's being done out there, and we're a conduit for people's understanding, which is fantastic. I really love that work.
Right, and you continue here to grow.
Yeah, that's right.
What are some of the innovations or things that you're going to do here in the library to grow the library?
So, all right, so we're in just a couple of months we'll finish our strategic plan, which is great, and needless to say, a lot of that is going to be about getting our story more out there.
Right.
One thing that is going to usher in is a lot more thinking strategically about the physical resources that we need to be able to do that more effectively. So, for instance, we out here in the main reading room, you can see these chairs all set up. We kind of max out at 300 people, and you know, when we get somebody who's really an exciting speaker, is going to, we have to be turning people away.
Right.
So the ability to house more people I think we will be doing a master plan, a site master plan in about a year and a half. But I do think that's going to rise to the surface. Also, the exhibitions, being able to do those more fully, I think that there's probably going to be a component of that,
right,
giving us more options with that kind of storytelling. And then, of course, the Arboretum out the windows here is, the footprint we've got is what we've got. But I think that we can also look and see how we integrate, what kind of development might be needed to integrate the stories that are out there with the stories that we're telling in here. And maybe that requires a more developed education program. So there's a lot of different sorts of thinking that we have to do before we come up with a kind of a tick list of the things that we need to build.
Yes, and there's a couple of things I want to touch on before we close this out. Thanks so much for your time. I know how busy you are. You're everywhere. But I think years ago, probably decades ago, there was a real push to try to get more women involved in STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. How is that going as far as you're concerned, as far as the educational process? And are you seeing more and more women becoming interested in doing those types of careers?
Interesting. Yes. Of course, in the library setting, I haven't been here a year yet, so I haven't seen a trajectory yet. I'm sure I will, but I do feel as if and of course my background's the natural sciences, and that has, I think, traditionally, especially in wildlife ecology, where I am, there's been a very good gender mix. In those more traditionally male-dominated programs like engineering, I think it is, and chemistry, it's starting to be a shift. I think there's still a lot more to do. And then, of course, the question is how we encourage and celebrate young people doing this. One thing that really was encouraging to me, so we host the Kansas City Invention Convention through the Henry Ford Museum in Michigan, and going there. So this was my first time this year, and there were about 300 inventors and so many young women. It was St. Teresa's. They cleaned up. It was, in terms of the awards, it was fantastic. So there was so much inventiveness, but also knowledgeable uptake of the science and engineering that has to go behind these inventions. Again, just thinking about the engineering and that kind of left brain thinking that they must have assimilated to come up with all of this, as well as the technology to produce it. It was just very refreshing. It felt like we're moving the needle, I guess. Okay,
well that's good. And the other thing I think everybody's concerned about these days is artificial intelligence. Does it scare? I know it can be so exciting. And then it can be so scary at the same time. If you read Isaac Asimov and you go back to iRobot and you know who's making who and what's going on here type situation.
It's funny.
But
I wrote a blog. I write a blog, and I wrote a post not that long ago on why is everybody so much more afraid of AI than they are of climate change? Like it's to me, there's a face of AI, right? It's that evil robot from Terminator or whatever. Whereas climate change is very diffuse, and is it real? Is it not real? And it's patterns.
I can't feel it today.
Yeah.
What is it?
Right. Exactly. Wait, I'm cold. There's no climate change. But for me, AI is a tool. It's a tool like a baseball bat is a tool. Now, you can do immense evil with a baseball bat.
Yes, you can.
It's not what it's for, and if it's used properly, it's an amazing thing. And so this is where I feel that AI, I will say they are some of the deeper concern, the say copyright concerns, those things are being addressed with things like you see quotations now, or you see where the sources are coming from. And
right.
that always was a concern to me. It was just like this mystery black box. Where are you getting your information? So that's good. I think there's been some very responsible thinking. And of course, the public outcry around all this has, I'm sure, sped the technology in that direction,
right.
which is great. But again, can we stop evil people from doing evil things? I think that's always going to be a concern, whatever the technology. Right. I think the deeper question is how we as a society deal with the increasing speed of change on everything, because no sooner we're going to get used to AI, but quantum is going to be in our labs.
Yes, right.
Right. So there's so many things that we're going to have to steel ourselves in the next
right.
few years.
Well, we're going to have to continue our education here at the Linda Hall Library.
Yes,
okay?
well,
to
please
stay
come.
up on top of that.
That's right.
I can't thank you enough for taking time.
Frank, thank you.
This whole library and the whole concept behind it, and the halls, and their forward thinking, and the original board of trustees and board to make it like this has been just incredible. And we're certainly glad you're here.
Thank you. I love being here.
Yeah, Linda Hall is one of the reasons there's just something about Kansas City. So there we are.
Thank you.
Doctor, thank you very much. Dr. Eric Dorfman and the Linda Hall Library, and folks, it's another reason. It's just something about Kansas City. Today's episode is brought to you in part by the generosity of our friends at the Cockrell Family Foundation. Thank you.